So I'm going to continue with the recording part. Okay. So what is that? So we're doing this. I don't want to have any kind of interruptions. Bye. Okay. Cool. Okay. Cool. So we were talking about right here the prompts. Now the implicit prompt. So we're going to repeat something in an indirect way for students to remember something. Now, once again, we're going to say, for example, rounded coin. Okay. So for no, I haven't shared my screen. Now we're sharing the screen. Okay, so cool. So in this case, we're going to say, for example, rounded coin. Okay, so we have a rounded coin. Now, let's say the student has said coin rounded. So now we're going to say, for example, this one, let's say. So instead of saying that, why? So the implicit repetition. So don't say that. Say rounded coin. Say rectangular paper. Say, I don't know, cylindrical drumstick, right? So that is going to be the way in which we're going to make those repetitions. And then the clarification request is, for example, I beg your pardon. I didn't understand, sorry. Would you mind to repeat that again? So that is going to be implicit, right? Okay, now the explicit form, you're going to use metalinguistic clues, right? So please, no paper rectangular, rectangular paper, rectangular paper, rounded coin, funny Jolly Roger, right? I don't know. I'm just using the elements that I have here next to me. Okay, cool. Now, example, repetition, black pick, yellow pick, right? Red pick, bronze pick, or metal pick. Okay, so those are going to be the elements that we're going to take into account for the prompts related to the repetition or the metalinguistic clues, right? So that's it. The other one is going to be elicitation with WH questions. So for example, what is that? Okay, how do you call, or what's the name of this? What was the name of this that I said?
Pick.
Pick, yeah. So that's it. Okay, damn it. What's the name of those?
Keys.
Very good. So that is going to be just questions. You need to ask questions about that. Okay, very good. Okay, now the paralinguistic signal. What's the meaning for paralinguistics? Careful, it doesn't have to be anything related to paranormal things, right? No paranormal related to paralinguistics. Nothing to be about that. Paralinguistics. What is paralinguistics?
It could be the speech.
No. Paralinguistics.
Could be the body language, the gesture, facial expressions, could be.
Very good. That's it. Everything that is going to be related to non-verbal communication. Here in Colombia, we have a very good way for us to refer to everybody. We're going to move our lips, and that is going to be a way for us to say the paralinguistic expression. I don't know if you have seen a movie, or this kind of movie. Well, more than a movie, it's a show that is called La Pelota de Letras. I don't know if you have seen that.
Yes.
Yeah.
and in which Andres Lopez, he says like, he asks a question or he poses a question in which he's asking to his mother something, and his mother says something like a, mm, mm, right? That is going to be paralinguistic signal, non-verbal, right? So what is the definition of, so there, right? It's going to be like that. Now, for example, you're going to greet somebody else on the street, paralinguistic. So you're going to use your head, right? Like this. That's a way for say hi, right? Or the other one is like this. That's another way for us to say hi. That happens right here in Colombia. Another paralinguistic
Yeah,
element.
totally.
Example. Here in Colombia, we say that something that is crazy, Raz, so we're going to do this, right? We're going to move our finger in circles round next to our head for us to say that something is crazy or someone is crazy, right? But for example, if we go to Germany, in Germany, they don't do this, right? They do this. So something's missing in your head, or like this, right? So that is crazy. Now, if you go to Bulgaria, and I explained this aspect to you in the previous classes. So if we're going to say, for example, yes, you do this. And if you're going to say no, you do this, right? So El Chavo del Ocho wasn't that wrong at all. So Chespirito wasn't
Okay.
wrong at all. Chespirito,
Okay.
little Shakespearecito. So he was very good with the language. Now you know why.
Interesting.
Yeah. Very good. So here, over here.
This what?
Okay, now we're going to see how to categorize right here the corrected feedback. I want to ask you a question related to what we have learned so far, right? And I would like you to be honest and to tell me and the rest of the class what do you think about these questions. Number one, as a foreign language student, right, what type of corrective feedback do you prefer? Number one. Number two, would you correct your future students in the same way, and why? By implementing the previous corrected feedback type that you have already selected. And finally, what type of feedback do you find yourself giving the most and why? Meaning, what do you prefer the most and why? So guys, I'm going to give you like, let's say 2 minutes for you to think of those questions. In the meantime, I'm going to get a little bit of water. And no, that's it, right? So think of the questions, and I'll be back in 2 minutes. Ready? Are you ready?
No.
Nope. I.
Say hi. 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 You talk in English. Hi. No? Right.
I.
Okay, we're recording again. Okay, guys, so my question here is, as a foreign language learning student, what type of corrected feedback do you prefer the most and why? Anyone?
As a student,
Yeah, you as a student. So what kind of corrected feedback do you prefer? Implicit, explicit, we're going to see reformulation.
Wrong.
Here, which one of those do you prefer the most?
I think I prefer the metalinguistic clues.
Okay, why?
Because it can make you like kind of rethink in the mistake, but it's like the teacher is not going to tell you directly the correction. You need to focus on the mistake and try to correct them.
Okay, that's nice. Anybody else?
I think that elicitation.
Why?
I think that that method of asking question is good. It could create a meaningful learning because you don't say the explicit answer, but you make me wonder about the mistake.
Okay, what else?
Yeah, I agree.
I agree. No,
maybe
I am agree. No, I agree.
I really do. I really do agree.
I agree with Fabian, and also I choose repetitions.
Repetition or repetition?
Repetition.
Repetition. Repetition.
I know.
Competition. Repetition.
Estoy. Vi
Okay.
muchas T's y muchas sí.
Okay, very good. So repetition. Okay, sounds good. Okay,
Repetition.
so that's it. Okay, now, would you correct your students in the same way and why? I want you to listen to different voices. I want you to ask students like you to talk. Oh, yeah. Okay.
No, I
Gloria.
don't think so. Okay, okay.
Gloria, you there? No, she's shy.
Teacher, according to this question, no. I think so because I don't think so because each student doesn't have the same mistakes or difficulties. So I will give the feedback one by one and show what positive aspects it has and how it could improve them. Yes.
Okay, very good. So we're going to take into account right here one of the particularities related to education that is going to be related to what? Yeah, that is going to be related to the different intelligences we have. Okay, so multiple intelligences. Sorry. Okay, so by taking into account the multiple intelligences and the multiple ways in which students have personalities, we're going to take into account the way in which we're going to be even more assertive to that. But I'm going to explain you that later on. Very good, Angel. Okay, now, what type of feedback do you find yourself giving the most and why? What do you like the most? Which one do you like the most? Or sorry, I'm going to change the question. Which one you don't like the most? Or you like the less? So, which one you don't like? Anyone? No? You like everything?
I think each one has a positive point.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, now let's write here an overall related to when to use corrective feedback and when not, right? So in this case, well, it's not going to be like that. It's going to be when to use the implicit and explicit when it works. Okay, so the explicit corrective feedback, and we're talking about the prompts. We're going to do it now. Okay, so the explicit thing, example, you don't say I am agree, you say I agree, right? So that was strictly direct, that was explicit prompt, right? So it works for the student to notice about the mistake or the error now. But if we want to do uh, what? Oh yeah. But if we want to do a clarification in the long term, so we're going to use the implicit, right? Why? Because we're going to give examples, we're going to share some other ideas, we're going to use the context right here for us to what? Yeah, for us to work with it, right? And that's it. So remember, explicit works now, implicit in the long time, in the long term. Okay, right here we're going to say why corrective feedback is important. So here you can interact too. Okay, so number one, it influences learning behaviors, right? But you have to take into account that, as Angel said, there are differences related to behaviors and related to personalities in which we need to know how and when to use this corrective feedback, right? The strategies we're going to implement for the student not to feel offended, right? It's going to be difficult because this generation is kind of delicate, right? Fragile, but we need to do it, right? For us to avoid that the error stays there fossilized. Okay. Now, number two, you're going to avoid mismatches between teachers' intentions and learners' interpretations, resulting in negative effects on learning. You need to correct the mistake or the error no matter what, but you're not going to attack the student. No, what you're going to do is to try to look for a different way for the student to comprehend the reality of the situation, right? So the current situation. So you said something wrong, right? But there is a possibility for us to improve. How? Got it? Okay. Now, by taking into account this, um, some researchers has shown clear evidence that learners express preferences for receiving corrective feedback over having their errors ignored, right? What you said in the chat room in WhatsApp on WhatsApp was right. If you're going to tell me my corrections, please do it individually. So you like you to be corrective, right? But in an assertive way, not in a general way. Okay. Now, it says also when teachers take this into consideration, they become aware of when to offer corrective feedback and what types. So the general part is going to be implemented when there is something that is that a pattern that has been repeated all the time, right? So therefore, we're going to do that clarification in a general way. Now, for individual issues, so we're going to call student by student in order to tell him or her what was wrong and possibly what was right, right? So we're going to work with it. Finally, different cultural background, learners' personalities, proficiency levels, and age all play a role in what type of corrected feedback is the best or most effective to offer. So, for example, the corrected feedback that you're going to do for elementary school students is going to be different from the one related to high school students, and even more different from the ones that you're going to take into account for college students, right? So that's the way. So, for example, you need to be very explicit in primary school, in elementary school. You're going to be in the middle part related to being explicit and implicit inside high school, right? But you're going to be focused more in the implicit part. In college, um, that depends. There are going to be some little issues that you need to take into account for the explicit part. And most of the time, we're going to use we're going to what? We're going to take into account that the implicit part is going to play the major role in college education. Now, as you see, or as you have seen right here, or taking into account your experience, once again, taking into account your experience, we're going to take into consideration the following aspects. That some teachers, they have been kind of reluctant. Maybe they don't want to implement corrective feedback. Why? Because maybe this is going to be a kind of motivation killer, but guess what? Good news. So no, don't use this as a motivation killer. Instead of that, motivate your students with a very good attitude for them to learn from their mistake, right? But well, that is the magic trick you're going to use into the magician's hat, right? Now, some teachers, they don't like to give this opportunity for the corrective feedback because this is going to stop the flow of conversation, right? So maybe you're going to be more focused on conversations instead of doing the corrections, right? But if you don't correct the student in the meantime or the right time, that is going to be fossilized for a long time. And then something that could happen is going to be demotivation, right? That learners could lose face, meaning that they want to be extremely shy over there, right? So what we need to take into account is going to be this. So we need to close the gap between students' preferences for receiving corrective feedback and the teacher's reluctance to offer it, right? So it is going to be like that. Give me a second. So Whether you like it or not, the corrective feedback needs to be implemented, but you need to know how to do it. Now, by taking this into consideration, you see over there 5 different faces that students are going to show you inside the classroom. If you feel identified with one of those, nice. But try to think about what would happen or what could happen with this right here, this right here, this one, this other one, and this final one, right? So let's suppose that you're student number 5. Nice. So, and you're going to accept everything, just smile and say something like, well, if I have to correct it, I have to correct it. Easy as that. But what would happen if you see the reaction from student number 4, or from student number 1, or from student number 2? Would you understand student number 3 of being happy because he was corrected? Or you're going to understand student number 4, something like a grumpy all the time, moody because you had made a nice correction to him or her, and he or she didn't receive that correction in a very good way. Nice. So we need to think about it. Okay, let's continue. Okay, now regarding to this theoretical issue, we need to take into account also that the interaction and the skill acquisition theory. Now, for interaction, we're going to use the implicit part related to recasters, extracting the information, letting the student talk a lot, right? But for the skill acquisition theory, we're going to use prompts. We're going to use explicit examples, right? Explicit theory for him or her to be aware on how to use that. Okay, now almost ending with this. So we're going to take into account some other aspects. Number 1, the learner uptake, right? So the learner's responses. So which could be these responses, right? So these responses are going to be focused just in the part of providing the opportunity for the learner to respond to the recast. Meaning that if you're going to create that space for the corrected feedback, so let the student interact and don't stop the student about inside that interaction, right? But what if inside those interactions there's going to be another error? Let the error occur, let the error happen, and then correct it once again, right? Some of you has said once, I think, I'm going to use it in Spanish, something like, ¿y yo para qué hablo? Entre más hable, más me van a corregir. But that's the clue. That's the thing. That's the issue, right? So if you don't talk, if you don't express what you feel, what you think, what you know, how are you going to be supposed to be corrected, and how are you going to be supposed to master your ideas, or to master the way in which you're going to express your ideas? Okay, so here we need to take into account 2 things. Number 1, the new knowledge, and number 2, the knowledge you already have. Okay, and well, these are going to be just related to the linguistic targets, right? And related to the way in which we're going to correct this. So, regarding to this, the grammatical targets, they need to be explicit. But in terms of communication, it is not recommended for the student to be corrected over and over again, right? So give some prompts for the student to try to be aware about those issues and for him to be autonomous and correct himself or herself. The lexical target, I'm talking about the vocabulary, you need to be very, very explicit, right? Although grammar needs to be implicit, right? Examples, that's it. The phonological target. So, for example, we're going to say, once again, apple. No, correct it once, and it's going to be better when it's explicit. It's not apple, it's apple, right? And the pragmatic targets. So, it's going to be very effective, but it needs to be explicit. So, how to use expression in the proper context by not offending anyone, right? And that's it. Okay. Now, there are going to be some situations in which this is going to happen, but I'm going to talk about this in a new conversation, right? Because time is over here. Give me a moment. That's it. Okay, I want to stop right here this this part.